Right, this video is about maintaining verb tense consistency as you write. By the end of this video, you will understand what it means to keep your verb tense consistent and have practice identifying inconsistent verbs and even writing some of your own. Okay, just as a quick reminder, make sure that you are looking for the pencil mark. Every time you see the pencil mark, that means that something needs to be written down on your guided notes. Use the rule of 5 as often as you can and pause. It is so essential that you pause. Otherwise, you won't be able to get things written down. All right, so the most important thing we want to understand is that careful writers are going to avoid shifts in verb tense unless there really is a good reason. Let's go over some definitions for that. A shift means a change. So when you change the verb tense when you're not supposed to, it creates confusion for your reader. The verb tense refers to whether the verb is past tense, present tense, or future tense. There are other tenses as well, but we're not going to worry about those right now. Here's some examples of taking one verb and changing it into some of the different tenses. You can have eat, eating, ate, has eaten, will eat, and had eaten. Some of these are past, some of these are present, some of these are future. When you write, you want your verb tense to be the same all the way through your story. Please pause and make sure you get the definitions written down for shift and verb tense. So why do we care about the verb tense and whether or not it changes? Well, the verb tense really helps the reader to understand when the action is taking place. If you are switching up the verb tense, then your reader may get really confused. Let's look at some examples. Here's one example. Please follow along while I read. Think about this question. What tense are all the verbs in? Are they all past, present, or future? It was a bitter, cold night for speed skating, but the 3 teams gave their all for the regional competition. Most surprising was the performance of Coolidge High, which outskated the other 2 teams in every category. They were the easy winners. Okay, let's look at the verbs. We have was, gave, was, outskated, and were. All of these verbs are in past tense. That means that the consistency is the same. There is consistency. Now let's look at another paragraph that maybe isn't consistent. We want to identify what the problem is and then fix it, and you'll be doing this on your guided note page. Please follow along while I read. Johnson raced down the court. He stops dead, raises those incredibly long arms, and sinks the ball slow motion into the basket. He scored 33 points before the final quarter ended. Okay, well, some of the verbs are in past tense and some of them are in present tense. So it can be really confusing for the reader because they're not sure when this is taking place. Raced and scored are both past tense verbs. They're showing that they happened before. On the other hand, raises, stops, and sinks are all present tense verbs. And so it can be very confusing to the reader. In your guided notes, you're to take the same paragraph and either change the past tense verbs to present or the present tense verbs to past so that all the verbs are either in past or present tense and that there's no change. Make sure you pause and change those verbs. You can just cross out the verbs that aren't supposed to be there and write the verb form that you want above it. So how do we avoid this tense shifting? Well, first of all, make sure that you know what tense you're going to start out with. If you start out with past, stick with it. If you start out with present, stick with it. Most stories are actually told in past tense, but it is possible to tell a story in the present tense. The key, again, is just to keep it the same. One way to check is just to go through and highlight the verbs that you're using. Are they all in the same tense? And if they're not, what changes do you might you need to make? All right, let's do one final practice. You're going to write about what you did today twice. And you can make it up. It's okay to be fictional for this. Might make it more interesting. So you're going to write it first in past tense. Tell something that happened, very short, in past tense. Here's an example. I discovered that I had a blue dot growing on my hand. I went to the doctor, and she said I needed to stop eating so many blue M&Ms. Because of that, I switched to red M&Ms. The next day, a red dot started growing on my hand. Oops. Okay. You're also going to write the exact same story, but in present tense. Here's this story in present tense. I discover that I have a blue dot growing on my hand. I go to the doctor, and she says I need to stop eating so many blue M&Ms. Because of that, I switch to red M&Ms. The next day, a red dot starts growing on my hand. Oops. Okay, the exact same story, but when it's taking place changes. The first one is all past. The second one is all present. It feels different, and sometimes writing in all present can be a bit tricky because you naturally want to move to past, which is why most authors probably pick past tense. So pause and make sure that you write down two short little stories. One's in past, and then the same story again in present. Okay, now that you've done that, make sure you have your summary written on your guided notes as well as your hot question. Make sure that the notes are completely done before you submit it to Schoology. If you did happen to use a paper copy, be sure to take a good quality picture of it, load it into Notability, resize it so that it's as big as you can get it, and then submit it. All right, that's all, folks.